Episode 33 of the Interpretation Station is call to order. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, for another round of Wham Bam from Euroland. This time we've got a Russian text that we're going to be doing today. This is actually one of the first ones I posted on the LinkedIn group, so going back a couple of weeks. It was by old friend, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, one of the most interesting speakers there is on the scene. This was his address to the general debate in 2018 in New York. So there was a lot of interesting vocabulary in this one. So we'll get straight down to it. So if you will turn your eyes to the screen, we can begin. And I've had some new inspiration actually since I even did this, so we'll get some good words, Okay, so if you can see now, so the first thing we start off with that I highlighted was настойчиво питаются. So this is one of these classic cases where you can be looking for. There's probably like a really good single English word to sum up an adverb and a verb. Okay, so what I put here was hell bent on, or you could just say bent on. Our Western colleagues seem hell bent on substituting this, etc. Yeah, hell bent on or bent on. Now, it's occurred to me in the meantime, just this morning, as I was sort of passing my eye over the text, one of these expressions, right, that in English we use it, we say it all the time. And yet, I don't think I've ever managed to use it in the heat of battle on the microphone in 12 years of doing this. And that expression is dying to, okay? Our Western colleagues are dying to substitute верховенство права, the rule of law, with some kind of rules-based order. We say it all the time. I bet every day you say, I'm dying to do something. He's dying to do something. But it never occurs to us, well, we get into this mode where we follow the original word, the syntax so closely that we forget that in English, sometimes these ideas, we just have a slightly different way of expressing them. And that's why I'm here. I'm there to open those doors for you. Okay, so there you go, dying to do something. All right, moving on here. Изобретаются, so a good word, is to, these rules were concocted or, were dreamt up. That's always a good word to concoct. Often the Russians accuse the West of concocting these ideas, these rules and things. Now, another one that came to me this morning. Oh yes, I had to grab my brain was working full time this morning. В зависимости от политической целесообразности. Now, what I put here was pretty good, I think. Expediency for just целесообразности, okay, just as a word for word solution. But then again, I was thinking, okay, that whole structure, в зависимости от политической целесообразности, and so basically, the idea that came to me was that these rules were concocted just for political point scoring, for scoring political points. I think that when you hear целесообразности, think point scoring, okay? I think that fits in beautifully here. Okay, I mean, in Russian, I think I would have probably said, it was concocted depending on political expediency. And if you say that, that's very good. But what the most natural thing we would probably say is in English, these rules were concocted purely for scoring political points. Okay, so think of some way of getting the idea of point scoring into it. So again, I was very happy with that one. Okay, образец двойных стандартов. Okay, so I'll give you two here. Classic or textbook. These are textbook double standards. That's something we say a lot. At least in British English, we say it a lot. I guess in America, I don't know, there are certain things that in American English maybe don't say as much, but we say that a lot in British English. A textbook example of something. Голословные обвинения. Again, so two words in Russian. I think that the single word in English, insinuations, I think it sums that up very nicely. And I was looking for that word just on Friday. I was in a meeting, and the Russian said ложные obvinienie, and I couldn't remember insinuations. Okay, I think I just said false accusations. Having said that, if they say ложные обвинения, remember when the Russians speak, they are really your client. And it occurred to me, you know, when the Russians say ложные, they probably want to hear the word false. So sometimes you just got to play safe. And you say ложные is an important word, and I'd so probably say false. But here, голословные обвинения, I think insinuations works very well. Okay, then down here. Расшатывание и свержение демократически избранных правительств. So the first thing I say is that, you know, again, if this is going at speed, 1 out of 2 of these nouns should be fine. So I've given you destabilizing, which is like the расшатывание idea. For свержение, you know, like toppling or overthrowing as well as good. So that's why I said here 1 out of 2 should be fine. Пытаются втягивать одни страны. So again, I just drag into. It's a good word for втягивать. Again, dragging some country into a conflict or whatever. In this case, okay, they're trying to втягивать them into построение под себя военные союзы. I mean, that whole thing, построение под себя, just means their own, you know, well, the ones they have built under them. But, you know, so, again, if you're going at pace, you know, that's just what that means. It's their own military alliances. Okay, and okay, другим государствам грозит наказанием. So I've given you here are threatened with sanctions. All right. Again, here we have in this next paragraph another example. 2 Russian words. Агрессивные наскоки. I think tirades sums that idea up perfectly. To be honest, tirade. They often talk about, you know, other countries going on these tirades against dissenting countries. Often the dissenting countries, you know, it's like countries like Iran, Syria, Russia, whatever. Okay, ich secretariatские структуры. I think here you can just drop the strukturi, and if you could just drop it and just, you know, their secretariats. He's talking about privatizing the secretariats of these international institutions. I think you can just drop the strukturi. Наделить их правами. So just to remind you, know, that's the word, usually the best word for наделить. Assign. Again, в расчете на то, чтобы впоследствии, again, that's a very long-winded just way of just saying here, with a view to then, with a view to subsequently, if you want to sort of really, with последствия, give the literal meaning of последствия, but I think with a view to then, it does the same job. Сужение пространства. So this is an important. Often when you hear сужение, at least I do, my sort of instinct is I'm thinking restricting, constricting. But when it's talking about space, what we really say is, you know, it's shrinking. They often talk about shrinking civic space. It's a word that comes up quite a bit. Again, expression, so to shrink, shrinking space. Then some more vocabulary here. Nagnietanie konfrontacji. So here I said that, you know, fanning the flames of confrontation. Okay, that's maybe a bit long. I quite like it, fanning the flame. It's a very good idea to have in mind. I was thinking perhaps also subsequently stoking confrontation. You'll have to stoke it. Just imagine those fires, stoking, getting that fire going. Существенно повышение. This is again collocation that's used frequently by the Russians, and again, I think the word heightening sums it up pretty well. I think it sort of encapsulates the meaning in one word. So heightening the risk of a возникновение конфликтов. Okay, so yeah, I guess the textbook rendering of возникновение is emergence, which would be fine, emergence of spontaneous conflicts. But really, for conflicts, the best collocation I think is, you know, maybe the outbreak. Heightening the risk of outbreak of spontaneous conflicts. Now, here's an interesting word here. Корыстные амбиции. So this is used a lot. And just remember one of these 2 alternatives: hidden agenda or ulterior motives. They're I just sort of go between the 2 of them. I really make a point of remembering those 2 expressions in English. Hidden agenda and ulterior motives. Now, I make the point here, so this paragraph starts with za. That's always something to watch out for. When a Russian sentence begins with a preposition, my instinct is to leave the preposition out. It is to turn whatever the noun is, in this case the hidden agenda, make it the subject of the sentence, and then adjust the rest of the sentence as you go along. So that's why I say here, if you drop za, which would be the sensible approach, okay, you need to turn platit into cost, as in will cost the international community dear. So this is what I mean, that if you do that, and I think that is overall the best approach, to drop the prepositions at the start sentences, turn the noun and make it the subject, and then adjust as you go along. So that means in this case, obviously, platit, you need to have the opposite meaning of platit from the other side. It's the cost. It will cost мировому сообществу высокую цену. It will cost the international community dear. Another favorite word by the Russians, probuksovivat. Oh, there's probuksovka. Okay, so I've gone with stalemate here. There's quite a few synonyms for that. You've got, or as my colleague Dan Harrison would say, a semantic field. Okay, so you've got stalemate, you've got deadlock, paralysis, limbo. You could see here the collective limbo in the mechanisms for. You've got a whole string of them. Okay, stalemate, limbo, deadlock, paralysis. Общее для всех just means shared, doesn't it? Okay, you don't need to. The idea of the для всех doesn't need to be reflected. When you say shared, I think it sort of speaks for itself that it's among everyone. На смену дипломаты, культуре переговоров. So here I've just crossed out kultura. I think you don't really need that. I think instead of diplomacy, negotiation, and compromise, I think kultura in this sense is redundant. So they're getting replaced by, this is another place, look, this is a na směnu diplomati. Okay, another sentence that begins here with a preposition that I think you'd be better off, you could go here with, na směnu, you could say instead of or replacing diplomacy, negotiations, and compromise, you have diktat, unilateral restrictions. Okay, so you turn that приходить into you have or there is. Okay. Без согласия с БОН. Okay, so without the assent or without the consent, one or the other are fine. И носящие экстерриториальный характер. Okay, so this носящий, you get often that just means of. It's of an extraterritorial nature. You get something similar in Spanish when they use like teniendo un carácter extraterritorial. It just means that you don't need to render the verb, really. You just make it into an of, an extraterritorial nature. Десятки стран, okay, подобные меры, охватывающие уже десятки стран. So I've gone here. Usually for десятки, I go for scores. Okay, that's my usual, like score as in the number, as in 20s. Here I thought maybe that's a bit too many, so I've gone for dozens instead. I guess you could just say many. You could just say many countries. There's a few ways you could handle this one. So anyway, I've gone for dozens on this occasion. Более чем полувековая. Again, this is a bit of a mouthful to get into English. The over half a century long blockade of Cuba. So I've given you a solution. If you're struggling to keep out, just something quickly to say the decades long. It gives the same notion. It's been going on for many decades, rather than having to do all those linguistic somersaults. The over half a century long blockade, somehow decades long, seems, for me at least, rolls off the tongue much quicker. Getting to the end, then close here. Okay, желающих выносить приговоры. Выносить приговоры, I think is a good solution to remember here is pass judgment. These countries, the West is always passing judgment on their enemies, on their sort of geopolitical rivals. Again, it's a theme that comes up a lot with the Russians. So here, this is those who would pass judgment. We say that in English. We don't even need to say who would wish to or who would like to. That sort of slight emphasis in the would expresses that notion. Those who would pass judgment. Без суда и следствия. Without trial. I've just said that. I don't need. I get this literally without trial or investigation. I think without trial works just fine. Nie ubawiается. All right. In other words, there are loads of them, okay? There are loads of them. So I've given you something, interesting to say in English rather than, okay, I've said are legion or failing that numerous. So, if you can't come up with the really high register solution, you just make sure you get the basic idea across. Those that would pass judgment are numerous, but there you go. If you can come up with that solution, the our legion, that sounds really good. And okay, we're getting very close to the end now. Предъявление кому-либо, okay, для предъявления кому-либо вины, pointing the finger. Okay, often when they accuse other, the whole business of accusations. Make that when you hear that обвинение of any sort. In this case, okay, this is предъявление вины. Think of pointing the finger, okay? Because again, the Russians will often criticize the West for constantly wanting to point the finger at someone. Okay, it sounds a bit better than just accusing. Okay, it's a good synonym to have up your sleeve. Okay, and now this is this to finish with. This is a good one. All right. Утверждение в духе пресловутого highly likely. That's how they would say it in Russian. So, as I write here by the star, I've heard the Russians use this highly likely thing 3 or 4 times in the last few months. You need to find a package of words that rolls off the tongue in English. Yeah, so I've come across this in the last 6 months, like I say, 3 or 4 times. This is a thing. I don't know if it was these sort of notions, I think, come from the top, maybe from Putin, from Lavrov, and they sort of trickle down, and they're often repeated by the ministers, diplomats, the further sort of down the chain you go. So yeah, find something that you're happy with. All right. I've given you two possible solutions. They just have to play the highly likely card is one, okay? Or they just use their trusty old highly likelies. Find something that sits well with you, okay? Because they are using it. And as I say, perhaps say the highly likely in a funny voice. And I'm not joking here, right? Because when the Russians say it, just them saying the highly likely, that has the effect. So you sort of need to try and create that similar effect, but obviously the highly likely is going to be in the same language as the rest of the text that you're translating. So you have to say something like, they just have to play the highly likely card, or they just use their trusty old highly likely. Maybe even a little laugh to get that impact. Okay, that's all for today. I hope that was a really good text. You can always rely on Lavrov for a bit of fun. Okay, guys. Well, I hope you enjoyed. I hope you learned a couple of new solutions, a couple of new tricks. If you enjoyed the show, smash the thumbs up button. If you haven't subscribed yet, and subscribe, for God's sake. Why haven't you subscribed if you haven't subscribed yet and you're watching this? And also press the bell there to get the notifications every time new videos come out. We've got a new Russian tutorial coming out later on this week. It's going to be from the Committee Against Corruption, the Convention Against Corruption. So that's something to look forward to. Keep following me on the LinkedIn. Join the group, the LinkedIn group called The Interpretation Station. Lots of interesting stuff to see there. And that's pretty much it. So it has been a pleasure as always. And now it is time to just say that episode 33 of The Interpretation Station is adjourned.